Hi, I'm Benjamin Mac Jackson, founder of the World War II Veterans History Project. I started this project in the summer of 2015 with the goal of providing knowledge and inspiration to my generation so they can better appreciate and understand what these heroes went through. My mission is to preserve the memories of the greatest generation. In this story, World War II veteran Joe Blum, a private first class in the United States Marine Corps, shares his experiences serving in the 1st Marine Division. He served in China for most of the war and tells about his experiences with freed Japanese POWs after the war's end. He also describes how he obtained the prized souvenir of war, a Japanese officer's sword. Here's his story.
Joseph Blum, Corporal, 1st Division, 3rd Regiment of the United States Marine Corps. I wanted to get in the Marine Corps. And so that got to be a problem. I did not want to wait till I was 18. And so, in a little town near where I grew up, there was a doctor that you could, well, I better say a person, better not use the word doctor, I don't know who you're talking about. A person you could get a birth certificate changing your age to whatever you wanted. And so I went to his office one day and told him, I said, I want to get in the Marine Corps. And I remember him making a statement, so they'll kill you in there. You'll never make it. And I said, well, that's my problem, isn't it? Okay. He said, give me $5. And so I gave him $5. And he said, I'll go over to the courthouse and you go across the street. There was a pub there. Sit by the window where you can see across the street to the courthouse. And if I come out and I don't have a piece of paper in my hand, said, you just lost you $5 and go on home. If you see a piece of paper in my hand, you wait for me and you'll have a birth certificate that says you're 18 years old. So anyway, I got the birth certificate, and then I found out the closest place I could get the Marine Corps was 100 miles away. And I didn't have any money to buy tickets and stuff like that to go 100 miles to get in. So I registered for the draft board. That was a comedy in its own right. So anyway, I said, well, gosh, says I'm 18. Now I've got to register for the draft board because I'm 18 years old. It's law. And so I went up to the draft office, and I remember a lady that was chairman of the draft board was a lady with a name of Maxie Phillips, I think. And so I went up and what are you here for? Something like that. We're here to register for the trash. You're not old enough to register for the trash. Yes, I am. Here's my birth certificate. And aren't you Kelly Bloom's son? Yes, ma'am. You're not you're not old enough to register for the draft. I said, there's my birth certificate. And she'd look at that thing and she'd look at me, and I think she finally figured out what had happened. She went on this thing again and said, you sure that you're Kelly Bloom's son? Yes, ma'am. Okay. And you're not working draft. You don't have a job. No, no, ma'am. Well, I'm going to send this in, and you're going to get drafted in a hurry. Because you say you're 18, you don't have any work. They're going to grab you so fast to make your head swim or something like that. That's all right, fine. About 3 weeks later, I get a notice in the mail and a package. Said to tell me to report to some draft board. And I remember it was rainy and it was cold and it was a miserable way. And I got on the book, told me bus, I think it's Greyhound, or there was two bus services ran through the little town, and I think mine was a Greyhound. And get on that bus and go to this place in Georgia and hand this package to the bus driver. He'll know what to do with it. I got to Fort Stewart, and it was like a nightmare. I thought, my God, they're going to draft me into the Army, and I don't have any way of getting around it, because that's what they're. And then I'm thinking, I'm going to have to call my dad and have him to tell him I lied about I'm not that old, and my paperwork's all forged. I said, I'm going to have to tell him all of this, or get my dad to tell him. And I said, no, I don't want to put him through that, and he may not want to do it when he does. I'm walking across a parade field. They call them parade fields. There was on this fort, and it was miserable weather. And I'm walking across there, and I saw this Navy officer, and I knew there was some connection between the Navy and the Marine Corps. I did not know that the Marine Corps was part of the Navy. It still is. But I thought, well, okay. I just dropped out of the line. It must have been 200 people in the line anyway, but to be drafted. I just thought, well, I'll drop out of the line. Even if they start looking for me, it'll be 2 or 3 weeks before they figure they're missing one. I dropped out and just went up to this guy, and I said, I came down here to get in the Marine Corps. And I said, I've got a little bit of a problem. I'm registered for the draft, so they're going to put me in. They've got me in this line. I'm pretty sure that line is for the Army. I can tell by the size of it. So this officer is standing there looking at the paper. And just about he gets to looking at it, just about the time he gets through looking at it, an old Marine gunnery sergeant walks by. And so this guy just turns to him and turns to this officer and says, Gunny, this looks like it'd make a good man for you. And the old gunnery sergeant looked at it and said, yep. Yeah, come on, I think I can do some of that. And he took me down to a Marine Corps, little Marine Corps station. About 15 minutes later, I'm a Marine. first thing after I got sworn into the Marine Corps, they'd give me a 10-day leave to start off with, and then told me to report to Paris Island, which is the training center for the East Coast Marine people going into the Marine. When I went, you stayed at this little town in South Carolina. I don't recall the name of it, but it's can't remember it anymore. It's a little town, and you stayed there that night. And next day, the boat came along, and they picked you up and took you across the bay to the Marine Corps, and you went through the normal status of first you walked through a big pan of purple water. I think that was to keep you from getting probably whatever kind of diseases you might be carrying in your feet or something. Anyway, you walk through the purple water, and then they took you down through the line, and they had a line where they'd just look at you. They asked you what your weight was. My weight, believe it or not, was 148 pounds. I was 6 feet tall and 148 pounds. And so they just threw some clothing to me. And I said, well, aren't you going to measure me for what kind of clothing and so on I'm wearing? And they said, no. I said, we'll work you into that. I said, we're pretty good at looking at you and knowing if you're skinny, we're going to put some weight on you. If you're fat, we're going to take some weight off of you. But anyway, they run me through and give me my clothes and assigned me to a barrack. And then I think they give me another 10-day leave to go home. That's the last time you're going to see home for a while, I guess. Something like to that effect. You went through 13 weeks of training. That's interesting. The Navy and the Army still goes 8 weeks. Marine Corps goes 13 weeks. Well, 12 weeks of training, and 1 week of your last week you're in the mess hall. I guess that's a way of, I'm not sure what that's for, but I guess that's the way they get some free mess hall work, maybe, I don't know. But that's their way of doing things. And then once you do that, you get assigned to probably it might be a semi location, but you don't know. They assign you to some. In mine, I got assigned to artillery. I said, I don't want artillery. And he said, well, you're going to artillery. Your artillery, you're using cannons, and you're locating targets, and you don't really see your enemy. He's 120 millimeter cannons that we used a lot, and Nidus had a range of around 18 to 19 miles. On a cannon, you've got a rangefinder. You had a rangefinder, as before you had equipment like you have now, where you, you can everything. You can hit a button and it does everything for you. On a rangefinder, you look at your weapon, or you not your weapon. You try to find a target, and that thing's got enough. With it, it's got a high-powered telescope or field glass, some sort of magnifying line, and you have that to look through to try to find targets, as they call them. And once you find a target, you start to see the settings. You have little buttons. You're turning these buttons to pull a target in, and when you get a picture in your rangefinder that they think you like, and you'll see something like mark. And when you say mark, somebody else somewhere that you never see says commence firing. And they're on a speaker somewhere or on some sort of electronic thing. You'd fire, and then you'd look through your scope. You'd see how close that explosion came to where you want to go. And if it was left or right or something, you'd look at it and say, well, 20 feet to the right, or 20 yards to the right, or something like that. You'd tell them, and then you'd reset your rangefinder to where you thought it should be to be on target. Then then that's when you tell them to mark, and then somebody would call it. You don't see where they are, that they're calling the shots, and so they'll call the shots and then start shooting. And then all you hear from there on till they quit. And some of it will drive you crazy because it'll be at night, because you hear these artillery shells going, because you're in a battalion. You got cannons here, you got cannons over here. They're all around you, and some of them are there firing over your head, and you hear that whoosh whoosh of their shells, and the things may get just about drive you nuts. They did me. They would cut like power lines and so on. They'd try to find our locations on these artillery. It was a mechanical station, an electrical station, where all your equipment was, and the Japanese would try to find that and try to cut the lines so you didn't know what to shoot at. Without your rangefinder, you didn't have it, and they would slip up on you, and usually I guess they use a hatchet or a sword or whatever that. All of my experience with the artillery was mostly comical, because the Japanese are about like we were when it come to artillery. The equipment wasn't. It was as good as the individual, and they'd give you an eye test to see who had eyes, the right kind of view, right kind of vision to pick targets. Seems like it had took a, and so I was after taking all the eye tests in their battery. I was the one passed to do that, so I was the one that picked the targets. and all the thing I'm doing, I'm picking targets, and I'm wishing I'm somewhere else, because you're looking around over miles and miles of territory. You're looking for something that moves. You're looking for vehicles, and another thing, when you start with that over several miles away, You want to be sure that the vehicles you identify are Japanese and not American. Because you picked the wrong one. Once you give the mark for the store, they're going to pull in. They're going to fire for. They could possibly fire on on your people. It's coming down the street in Beijing, and I don't know where we were just goofing around. I guess maybe going to a restaurant or something. We was coming down the street, and a Japanese soldier was coming the other direction, and he had this sword on his hip. They had a little swing thing, they swing on them there, big enough so it don't drag the ground. Some of those little short guys probably had trouble with it, and I just wanted to see it. So when he came up, I couldn't see in Japanese, and he didn't know any English. And I just pointed to it and tell him I want to see the thing. Well, I guess he thought I was taking it away from him because well, he's no longer a soldier because the war's over with. He's a civilian now. But anyway, maybe he thought that he wasn't supposed to have it or something. And so I'm looking at the thing, and of course it looked brand new then, and I'm looking at it, messing with it. Well, when I got through looking at it and to give it back to him, he's out of sight. I don't know. I looked up street and down the street and all. I couldn't see any Japanese soldiers or ex-soldiers. I said, well, I guess I'm stuck with it then. And then maybe if he wants it bad enough, he'd come into the Marine Corps headquarters where we were, and he'd come looking for it. When the war was over, that's what we were doing in China. Part of the agreement between the various military countries that was involved, we were to be responsible for getting Japanese soldiers and their families and all back to wherever their homeland was. Not necessarily Japan, but wherever they were out of. Some of them were Mongolia, and a few of them from foreign countries that joined the Japanese military. And so so it was in the north part of China. It was about 250,000 Japanese soldiers. And I'm not sure whether that was the soldiers or where it was soldiers and family, but we was responsible for about 250,000 Japanese. Well, each of us, we was assigned 2 platoons of Japanese, which had been about 60 to 65 people. And we were just to look after them, try to find jobs for them, find things for them to do to keep up, as the military looked at us, keeping them busy so they don't get discouraged. We found quite a few of the Japanese in there. We had 2 platoons, and quite a few of them could speak English, so that worked out. So we made deals with them. Said, how do you guys feel about this? Well, hey, we take them in there. They'd never been to anything like a Marine Corps mess hall. The food we had on, we put them in the food line with us, and then so we made deals with them. Said, well, what do you need out of from us? And they said, well, we need shavings, we need stuff to shave with, we need uh, stuff where we can make patch clothing, stuff like that. And we need candy bars. And we said, well, we can handle that. We wasn't supposed to. We would learn more judo and that kind of stuff. We wasn't interested in the language we was interested in. And so we'd tell them, well, I remember one in ours when our Japanese would say, you teach us judo and you give us a list of stuff you need and we'll get it out of our PX, like candy bars or beer or whatever regular things you can get, you know. We'd trade it for Japanese flags. It's amazing how many Japanese flags those guys could pump out. They'd have their wives and daughters and whatever making them at night. And we'd tell them how many Japanese flags we made. And so the Japanese would tell us, you don't let this out. So we could be shot by our people for doing something for that. We had a big time.
Mr. Blum is 93 years old and currently resides in Clermont, Florida. To learn more about the World War II Veterans History Project, please visit our website at www.veteranshistoryproject.com. We look forward to seeing you again for more exciting stories from the greatest generation.